Hello everybody. In this video, we are about to start pushing our application to our server. But before we actually do that, we need to protect our API. When I'm saying protect our API, we need to have some kind of authentication. Now, I will not explore an advanced method authentication. I will not handle users' passwords, things like that. We are not going to save and encrypt passwords, stuff like that, right? So remember when we did the one for the Giphy API? Well, they requested or they're required to use some kind of API key, right? So we're going to use something similar. It's actually going to be called username password, but in reality will be some kind of API key and API secret. We can call it like that, and at the end is pretty much the same thing, right? So we're going to have something that is going to be permanent on the server, and we're going to specify what that need to be, and after we do that, what username and what password needs to be, we need to implement it in our application. Now, the most common way to do authentication in Node.js is actually using Passport.js. Passport is a simple, unobtrusive, I don't know how to pronounce that, authentication for Node.js. It's actually really old. I want to be sincere, but it's still current. There's a big community behind it, and I just did a security scan over it, and there is no issues with Passport. So I believe we are safe. We actually implement it, and this is going to be just an example how to protect it. So how actually this works is we need to install Passport, and Passport is going to be some kind of middleware. Remember that middleware is something that happens just before the request response, and we're going to send it through the router. So we specify the route, the middleware, and then what it is supposed to be doing, and that's pretty much what it is. It's something just in the middle, as you can see right here. So before we actually go to the login and handle the request response as we usually do in the router, in the middle, before actually that, we want to use the Passport authenticate, and the Passport authenticate will handle the credentials. So we see, okay, if you are going to be allowed or not to proceed. A simple middleware. Now, this middleware can be changed, and there is, and instead of apply it here per route, we can just apply it to the router. So we can actually use something before this to application use this, and that means that all your routes is going to be protected through Passport, and it's a little bit what we're going to be doing. So let's proceed. As you can see, I have my server running right now. If I make a call to my API, I'm still responding and everything working the way it's supposed to. So the first step that we need to do, we need to start working with Passport. So we need to do here in my source code, I will install Passport. Perfect. And then we need to start handling that implementation. So to do it, we go to, let's create a new helper. And let's call this helper authentication, Auth.js. And from here, going to be something simple. Import Passport from Passport. And we're going to export default Passport. So this is what we're going to have. We're going to be using this in our servers. Now, Passport is a two-step service. Our servers crash it. Let me just cancel it for now. So the way to actually use it, to configure, we need to specify strategies. Strategies are the different way to you can authenticate. The most common one is the local strategy, that is pretty much using username and password, but you can use OpenID, Auth, you can use Facebook, Twitter, Google providers, you can use whatever you want. Actually, if you go in the menu, go to strategies, all those strategies are available. So if you want to use Cisco Spark authentication, if you want to use Bitly authentication, right? Here, Passport Exact, I don't know what is that. Like most of them, I don't know that you use Evernote authentication method. You can actually use all those that you're actually looking at here. So it's really robust. Right now it's showing around 500 authentication methods. And this is a piece that is on top of Passport. So Passport is the underlayer API, and then we just put a strategy, and the strategy will be, okay, it will be through username, it will be through Facebook, it will be through Gmail, things like that, right? So we are not going to go deep on those. It's not the purpose of this video. So we're going to use Passport local, and that's pretty much requesting sending the username and password, and that's it. So let's go to configure, and the first thing that we need to do is we need to initialize the middleware. To initialize middleware, we need to actually go to the configuration of our application with Express, right? And use initialize in there. Cool. So let me get back here. So we just importing Passport and we exporting that one as a helper. The strategy will be here in the middle. That's why we're doing it in a separate file. So let's go to the main index, and here I will import Passport just before the error handler. Import, and we actually can change the name. Let's change it to Authentication out from, and that will be in my helper folder, Authentication. So I changed the name from Passport to out because I'm exporting it as a default, and I can actually use whatever name that I want. So I'm changing here just to out to make a little more sense. Well, at least does for me, right? And just after we specify helmet, you can actually use application.use out.initialize. This is a function. With that, we have the init piece in our application. Now we need to apply the strategy. So let me just go back and let me look for username and password. This is the most common strategies that we have. And they give us some kind of example here. So when you have username and password strategy, the way that it works is you import Passport, you import the strategy section of this one. In this case, for username and password will be Passport local, right? And then Passport will use that strategy. That strategy have a callback function that will send the username, will send the password, and the done function. The idea here is to verify in your database that username exists. This is a function to do that. This is a little more from MongoDB, but at the end you can use whatever you wanted. If we have it next, we can use get from my DB users table where user ID equal username, something like that, and it's to get it. And if the user gets back, we need to verify if the password is correct, right? So they have a function called valid password that's used to validate it, and if the user doesn't exist, it responds with null false and a custom message called incorrect username. If the password is invalid, it responds with null false and something like that. But if the user is there and the password is valid, it responds with null user. And user is actually the authentication method that we need to handle, right? So seeing this is probably looks a little complicated because all the database stuff, but let's simplify a little bit. So first thing, we need to install Passport local. npm install Passport local. Cool. Let's get back to authentication method and let's import. And because we're using a new method, we can actually extract the strategy directly from Passport local, right? Let's see this, and let me actually change this order. Perfect. And then we use Passport use, and that new strategy, this here they call it local. In this case, we just extract as a strategy. So we can just use Passport.use new strategy. right? And here in the strategy, we're going to send something. In here, we're going to have the username, we have the password, and the .met. And this will be a function like this. And for now, before I proceed, let's keep or let's call this API credentials. Let's put in an env file and let's call it API user equal hello. Let's keep it simple. An API user equal API password. There. So my username, let's put it completed, is going to be this, and my API password will be this. Let me save it. Of course, let me send it to the example one, right? We always need to keep that track. Cool. And after we do that, we can actually use if username is identical as process.env.api username and password is identical a process.env.api password, right? We need to do something about it, right? So if this is, oops, let me say what I did here. Okay, if that's correct, we need to do return done null user. Return done is the callback function here, and we need to send a null object first, and the user will be user, right? And this should be return. Okay. Now, if this is wrong, we just need to return done null false. As simple like that. Now, in a real world scenario, this is not secure, right? We're just making a little gateway, let's call it like that, right? A little gate to protect your API with username and password. When in reality, is not that secure for a real world scenario, but here just to apply a point. So when we import Passport, we import the strategy, we create a strategy. This is actually a local strategy. That's how this is what we call it. And then we export Passport. And with that, we can use the next step. That's going to be on a route, pretty much put it on the middle. This is what it requires is to have Passport local. Let me look for that. Let's go to the Passport local module. Authenticate using username and password by plugging into Passport local authentication. Require verified to stream of what we already did. The username field and password field by default are username and password. We know that. By default, the local strategy expects find credentials in parameter. Okay, cool. And it says, okay, yeah, so pretty much we need to look for those parameters and we need to send username and password parameter to the call. That's what it's telling us. Okay, now we need to use this in the route. So we go to route node. And the nodes are actually the one that we want to protect. In order to protect them, we can actually we need to actually import it. Let's import. And let's call it Authentication. It's the name that we're giving it. We change the name here. So let's get from our helpers Authentication. And instead of adding that middleware in every route, let's put it at router level. So that we're going to be pretty cool. Is just to do router.use the authentication. And the way to use it is passport, authenticate, and the name. And we need to send something extra here, and that will be session false. I will explain that later. So we just need passport use going to be authentication dot authenticate. The name of the authentication, passport local, is actually called just local. And we need to send some object here as configuration. By default, passport, what it does is establish a session with the user. In an API needs to be stateless. That means that session doesn't exist. So we need to specify that the session, it should be false. And with that, we just protect our API. Let's start the server. npm run dev. Cool. And let's make the call. So we have the basic get call here. You get it. If we try it again, we have a bad request. It doesn't allow us. So we can go to the query section and we add username. And we know that the username that we specify should be hello. And the password should be there. And we make the call again. This works. Now we protect our API with a username and password. Let's try to remove one of those. And we send it. The API doesn't work. If we add it again, the API is there. Let's get the second one. Let's get that ID. And we have the ID 3, for example. So let's actually get ID 3. And we have the same response problem. We need to send the username, hello, and our password there. And now our method or API is protected. It's a really basic authentication method. It's not that secure, but at least it gives you an extra layer, right? So with this, I will say that the application is mostly done. We can do now is git add everything, git commit added authentication, and we push it. And now our application is ready to deploy. So I will stop the video right now and I will create another mini video where I will explain how to deploy the app. So for now, hope that you like it. Any question, any doubt, don't hesitate to reach me. Happy coding, everybody.